Hello, everybody. So, today I'm going to try to put a few questions together. There was one about solipsism. I did do a video on solipsism before, and why I think it's basically an immature understanding, that you come to non-duality and the first thing you think is, well, it's all mine, it's all belongs, it's all my creation, James's creation, this mind here. And that I think that really with more study and more time, I think you let go of that idea and understand that we share our being and share our consciousness. This getting trapped in solipsism, just thinking that it's your mind, your individual mind, like your kind of human mind, that all the other minds, well, why would you develop a human mind in the first place? With all the things that the human mind has, and then this human mind is creating the whole universe, and it's created other things that look like humans. I know it wouldn't be a human mind, but it basically would be working like a human mind, with all the way our minds work, basically. But yes, so it's going to be that. And also, how do we know that Atman is Brahman's? How do I know that this self here is the fundamental reality of everything? How do I know it's the same one that's in you as well? So first, let's look at subjective idealism. So I'm interested in idealism. Bernardo Kastrup does great work with his analytic idealism in combating all the ideas from materialism that hold us back. And I think it's a great introduction to get away from that. Then you get into Advaita Vedanta non-duality, and it kind of gets a bit deeper. The idea with idealism is that everything is in mind. And in Advaita Vedanta, it's not in mind. It says that the mind and matter, or mind and body, are created, come from in consciousness, our appearing consciousness. So it's not even that your mind is it's not saying that other people's minds aren't real. It is, but it's also saying your mind isn't real. So none of these minds are real. So your mind doesn't create reality. Now, how can we say that? Well, how can we prove that solipsism isn't true? How can we prove that outside our experience, there are other people having experiences? Well, this is actually a problem for everybody. It's a problem for materialists, because they say that inside our brain, all of this is generated by our brain, everything we see, and the other people, we infer that they are real. But materialism can't disprove solipsism either. But then there's lots of things we can't disprove. For example, are we in a simulation? Are we in the dream of a butterfly? There's so many things that we can't prove. It's infinite, really, what we can't prove. When I spoke to Rupert Spira, I told people about this in a previous video. He said, I was talking about neti, and I see I'm not my thoughts, and thoughts arise, and all this stuff. And he said, you don't need to disprove that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 7, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 8, and 2 + 2 doesn't equal 5 to see that 2 + 2 equals 4. So I think this idea of solipsism, how can we know that it's not solipsism? Well, Advaita Vedanta isn't saying the same thing as solipsism. It's not saying that our individual mind produces the world. Our mind and the world and other people's minds arise in consciousness, and that consciousness is what is shared. Now, the question of whether how can we know that other people, it's the same consciousness? Can we know Atman is Brahman? So my consciousness is not separate from your consciousness, because when we do the analysis, the drig-drisya viveka, so analysis of the seer and the seen, we go through, we say, well, I'm not the fridge, and I'm not my hand, I'm not my body, clearly, because I'm looking at my hand isn't looking at me. I'm not my thoughts, because I'm thinking about my thoughts, or I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 isn't thinking me, so it's an object. then the intellect. So we see how there's a change in understanding. You don't understand something, you study, and then you understand it. That understanding is in the intellect. And that is also, you can observe, you can see, I didn't understand, then I understood. So therefore, you are the observer of that change. So you're observer of the intellect as well. And then you're observer of the ego, and you're the observer of the blank space of deep sleep. And, and that observer you can never find. So this analysis, we end up with a big duality. We've got the world on one side, the object, and then the subject, the observer, the witness. So how do I know that you just don't have a separate witness? That, okay, so maybe consciousness is fundamental, but maybe I have one consciousness and you have another consciousness. And this is actually the viewpoint of Sankhya, this old philosophy that was around the time of Advaita Vedanta. And so this idea is that everyone has their own little individual consciousness. So how does Advaita Vedanta say that their consciousness is not separate from ours, so we actually share the same consciousness? Now, what they do is they say that it's not our job to prove that that consciousness is not separate. It's their responsibility. It's an assumption to say that consciousnesses are separate. So that's how they get out of it. They just say, well, it doesn't, the only thing, in my experience, there's only one witness. In your experience, there's only one witness. You need to prove that these are different witnesses. Now, I don't know how satisfying that will be, but I was thinking, I was thinking outside the box, and I was thinking outside probably the good line of reasoning to come up with my own idea. So if we're looking at an apple, so I look at an apple, you are in the room with me, and you look at the apple too, and we say, well, there's one apple. I see an apple, and you see an apple, and we decide it's the same apple. There's one apple here. However, with my awareness, I look at the apple, and you, with your awareness, you look at the apple, and we see there's one awareness, there's one subjectivity, and yet we don't say there's two apples. However, we do say there's two separate subjectivities. If the consciousness, how do we know that we're not just sharing the same consciousness? And I notice one consciousness, you notice one consciousness, I notice one apple, you notice one apple. There's only one of each. That's an idea. It's a bit like if we imagine, and we're getting away from even good analogies now. So imagine we're in the same room and we're both breathing the same air. And you say to me, James, can you prove that my air that I'm breathing, my air that I'm breathing is different from the air that you're breathing? Say, no, it's all the same air. And in the same way, and I can't prove that your air is not separate from my air, but it's all here. And in the same way, we kind of, in that way, the consciousness is a bit like it's that we're sharing the same consciousness, although that's bad, the way I describe it there, because the body is not sharing a consciousnness with another person, but just as a very bad metaphor, it's a bit like the air in the room. So I'm breathing air and you're breathing air, and we know it's the same air. I have consciousness and you have consciousness, and we just know it's the same consciousness. You could argue this from a different point of view. You could say that we've decided already that time and space is inside consciousness. Certainly space is inside consciousness. And when I did the video previously about the two atomic clocks, you can put two atomic clocks, one on the table and one on the floor. And because of the difference in gravity, one will move quicker. So you see the time moving differently within your awareness. So space is within my awareness. Time runs differently in parts of my awareness. So time is within my awareness as well. So we are outside time and space. And if we're outside time and space, then there's no separation in space and there's no separation in time, therefore there's only one thing. So therefore my consciousness must be your consciousness as well. And that's the idea that Schopenhauer promoted, but he called it the will, and it wasn't a very nice thing. But yes, because the constructs of time and space is something we kind of look through to structure the world, what there is outside of time and space can only be one thing, because there's no separation in time and there's no separation in space. So there we go. I hope I covered that. I think I did it quite thoroughly. I don't know if it all fits together though. I hope you can get something out of that. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.